Good morning and welcome back to A Day in the Life of a Woman Living in a Tent.
All these women want to live the lifestyle, but they can't afford it. After being in this limo business for 2 years, it's about a 60% chance of these women will book a limo in an executive area, paint the town red, whine to a bachelorette, and dispute the charge. Why is that? Because they don't have the money to fund the lifestyle that they want. These chicks in 2025 come with a lot of baggage, a lot of debt, up to their neck in their credit cards, right? Because they want to portray this luxury lifestyle. They want to put on this facade just for their Instagram. So these chicks are not living within their means whatsoever. They have that champagne taste, but they've only got that beer income. And it's almost pathetic to witness, right? You book a limo with a reputable company, you enjoy the moments, you take advantage of all of the resources, and then when you're done with it, you dispute the charge. This is a huge case of entitlement. I deserve this luxury, lavish lifestyle, and I don't have to pay for anything.
We are living through a moment that most people did not think would ever arrive. For decades, society was told that the trajectory was fixed, that progress only moved in one direction, and that entire systems had been permanently rewritten. But history does not move in straight lines. And what we are witnessing now is a sharp reversal that many people are completely unprepared for. By the end of this video, the picture will be clearer, the data will make sense, and the consequences of the last decade of decisions will be impossible to ignore. Stay with me until the very end, because this is not just about jobs or corporations or hiring trends. This is about survival, incentives, and what happens when reality reasserts itself after years of ideological experiments. What we are seeing now is not temporary turbulence. It is a structural shift. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. If you find value in this kind of analysis, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell. Make sure notifications are set to all so you never miss an Angry Guy video the moment it goes live. That support is what allows this channel to keep putting out long-form, honest discussions that most platforms try to avoid. I also want to remind you to check out Angry's Crypto Academy, which is linked in the description below. The Academy is designed to help you protect and safeguard your assets, understand how to buy, sell, and trade crypto responsibly, and position yourself for a future that is becoming more uncertain by the year. If you are serious about financial self-preservation and long-term stability, go check it out now. And if you are enjoying these Angry Guy videos and want to show direct support for the work that goes into them, you can do that by buying me a Red Bull using the link in the description. It is a simple way to support the channel and keep this content coming. Now let us get into what is really happening. Over the last several years, something unusual has been happening inside corporations, and until recently, it was not discussed openly. Hiring patterns changed, promotion pipelines changed, executive leadership structures changed. And for a long time, these changes were celebrated, encouraged, and even mandated in some cases. But today, quietly and without press conferences or public apologies, many of those same companies are reversing course. We're now seeing credible data suggesting that a large percentage of companies have slowed or stopped promoting women into top executive roles, particularly CEO and C-suite positions. At the same time, layoffs have disproportionately affected roles that were created or expanded during the peak years of diversity-focused hiring initiatives. This is not speculation. This is happening in publicly traded companies that are under constant pressure to deliver quarterly growth in a tightening economic environment. To understand why this shift is happening, you have to understand incentives. Corporations do not operate on ideology. They operate on profit, efficiency, and risk management. During periods of low interest rates, easy capital, and expanding markets, companies can afford to experiment. They can afford to prioritize optics, branding, and long term narratives over immediate performance. That era is now over. Inflation has reduced consumer spending power. Borrowing costs have risen. Investors are demanding profitability instead of promises. And when margins shrink, companies look inward. They analyze performance, output, and return on investment. Roles that cannot clearly justify their cost are the first to be scrutinized. That scrutiny does not care about intentions, it cares about results. During the last decade, and many companies openly stated that they were prioritizing demographic targets in hiring and promotion. In some cases, merit remained central. In other cases, it was openly deprioritized. The assumption was that representation itself would generate better outcomes. But assumptions are not balance sheets, and eventually, every assumption is tested. Now that test is happening. As layoffs accelerate and hiring freezes spread, companies are making decisions based on who produces measurable value under pressure. This environment is unforgiving. There are no participation trophies in a recession. And the uncomfortable truth is that some roles were created to satisfy cultural expectations rather than operational needs. Those roles are disappearing first. For individuals whose careers were built inside those structures, the shock is severe. Many believed the system that elevated them would always exist. Many structured their lives, finances, and expectations around continued stability. But labor markets are not moral systems, they are competitive systems. When conditions change, they do not negotiate. At the same time, we are seeing a broader social shift that intersects with these economic realities. For years, men were told, directly and indirectly, that they were unnecessary in many areas of life. Traditional expectations were challenged. In some cases, they were rejected outright. Men were encouraged to step back, disengage, and make room. Many listened. What followed was not chaos, but withdrawal. Large numbers of men began focusing inward. They reduced spending, they simplified their lives, they disengaged from dating, from social competition, and from systems that increasingly seemed hostile or unbalanced. This was not coordinated, it was organic. It was pattern recognition. As economic pressure increases, the consequences of that withdrawal become more visible. Many women who were told they would never need men are now discovering how expensive independence can be in a high inflation economy. Rent, food, transportation, and healthcare do not care about narratives. They require income. And when income disappears, ideology offers no safety net. This is not about blaming individuals. It is about acknowledging cause and effect. When a society reshapes incentives, behavior follows. When people are repeatedly told they are not wanted, they eventually leave. And when the systems that replace them begin to fail, there is no guarantee they will return. What makes this moment especially difficult is that it arrived quietly. There was no announcement that the rules had changed, no warning that the ladder was being pulled up. People are only discovering the shift after losing their jobs, after being passed over, after realizing that the skills they built are not easily transferable in a contracting market. For younger workers, this is a harsh lesson. For older workers, it is existential. Starting over is not easy when time, energy, and opportunity are limited. And companies facing their own survival pressures are not charities. They will choose whoever they believe gives them the best chance to endure the next 5 to 10 years. This is why the current moment feels so disorienting. The messaging has not caught up to reality. Many institutions are still speaking the language of the past decade while acting according to present conditions. That gap creates confusion, anger, and despair. Meanwhile, men who stepped away are discovering something unexpected. A simpler life costs less. Fewer obligations mean lower stress. Less consumption means more savings. For many, solitude has proven more peaceful than constant conflict. This does not mean men are thriving because others are struggling. It means adaptation works when reality is acknowledged early. History is filled with moments like this, periods where ideology outpaced economics and economics eventually reasserted itself. The people who suffer most are not those who made conscious choices, but those who believed the story would never change. As we move deeper into this decade, these trends are unlikely to reverse quickly. Companies will continue to prioritize efficiency. Labor markets will remain competitive. Social expectations will continue to adjust. And individuals will be forced to confront uncomfortable truths about dependency, resilience, and value. This is not the end of opportunity, but it is the end of illusion. To To understand how quickly this shift is happening, you have to look at how silent it has been. Major employment changes are usually announced with headlines, press releases, and political theater. This time, it is different. Layoffs are being framed as restructures. Hiring freezes are being described as pauses. Promotion pipelines are being quietly closed without explanation. People sense something is wrong, but they are not being told directly. Inside many organizations, middle managers have been given a new mandate that is rarely written down: reduce risk, increase output, justify every role. These instructions do not come with ideological language attached. They come with spreadsheets, performance metrics, and deadlines. When that happens, favoritism disappears quickly, optics disappear quickly. What remains is cold evaluation. This is where many people are getting stuck emotionally. They believe that once certain doors were opened, they would never close again. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. They believe progress was permanent. But corporations are not cultural movements, they are machines designed to survive competition. When resources shrink, machines become ruthless. What makes the current moment particularly brutal is that it coincides with one of the worst labor markets in recent memory. Job postings are down, competition is up, recruiters are overwhelmed, automated filtering systems are rejecting resumes before a human ever sees them. This means that anyone trying to re enter the workforce is facing far more resistance than they expected. For individuals whose careers were shaped by policies that prioritized demographic characteristics over technical depth, this is an especially harsh reality. In a boom economy, gaps can be hidden. In a contraction, gaps are exposed. Companies no longer have the luxury of training underperformers or carrying inefficiencies for the sake of appearances. This creates a cascading effect. When senior positions become harder to access, mid level roles become overcrowded. When mid level roles are overcrowded, entry level roles become nearly impossible to secure. And when entry points vanish, entire generations feel locked out. This is not theoretical, it is playing out in real time across multiple industries. At the same time, the social contract that once existed between men and women has fundamentally changed. For decades, men were expected to absorb risk: financial risk, emotional risk, social risk. They were expected to initiate, provide, protect, and endure. In return, they were told they were needed. Over the last several years, that message reversed. Men were told they were replaceable, optional, a problem to be managed rather than a foundation to be relied upon. Many were told directly to leave spaces, conversations, and institutions. Again, many listen. What happens when a large group of people disengage from systems that rely on their participation is not immediate collapse. It is slow erosion, dating markets stagnate, birth rates fall, consumer spending patterns change, entire industries that depended on male participation quietly shrink. Now, As economic pressure increases, some of the same voices that encourage disengagement are expressing confusion and distress. They are discovering that independence without infrastructure is fragile, that safety nets have limits, that the state cannot replace personal relationships indefinitely. This is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable because it forces a confrontation with trade offs that were never honestly discussed. You cannot dismantle mutual obligation without consequences. You cannot redefine roles without affecting incentives. And you cannot push people away for years and expect them to return on command. Men who have stepped back are not staging a protest, they are adapting. Many have discovered that a quieter life is cheaper, that fewer expectations mean fewer disappointments, that peace is often found in simplicity, not status. This realization spreads quietly, person by person, without hashtags or movements. Meanwhile, many women are encountering a reality they were told would never arrive, that careers can end abruptly, that companies do not owe loyalty, that financial independence requires constant maintenance, and that aging in a competitive labor market without a support system is not empowering, it is exhausting. None of this means cooperation is impossible. It means that the old narratives no longer work. The promises made during years of expansion are being tested during contraction, and contraction always reveals the truth. This is why emotional reactions are running so high. People are not just losing jobs, they are losing identities. They are losing stories they told themselves about how life would unfold. That kind of loss creates anger, denial, and blame. But anger does not change incentives. Denial does not reverse market forces. And blame does not pay rent. The people who will navigate this period successfully are not the loudest. They are the most adaptable. They are the ones who are willing to accept reality quickly and adjust without nostalgia. They do not argue with conditions, they work within them. For men who have already simplified their lives, this period is less destabilizing. Lower expenses mean lower pressure, fewer obligations mean more flexibility. This does not make them immune to hardship, but it does make them resilient. For women who were encouraged to build their entire identity around professional advancement within specific institutional frameworks, the shock is deeper. When those frameworks weaken, the ground disappears beneath them. And rebuilding takes time that many do not feel they have. This is where we see the emotional content flooding social media, videos expressing fear, confusion, frustration, appeals for empathy, appeals for help, appeals for men to re engage, to return, to participate again. But here's the hard truth: people do not re enter systems that punish them without guarantees. Trust, once broken, is expensive to rebuild. And many men have concluded that the risk is no longer worth the reward. This does not mean men hate women. It means they are prioritizing self preservation. It means they are no longer volunteering for roles that offer high cost and low security. It means they are making decisions based on outcomes, not expectations. For years, men were told that their instincts were wrong, that their discomfort was invalid, that their boundaries were oppressive. Over time, many internalized that message and disengaged rather than argue. Silence replaced debate. Absence replaced participation. Now, that absence is being felt. The workforce contraction of the mid 2020s has accelerated trends that were already underway. Automation is replacing routine tasks. Outsourcing is targeting high cost labor markets. Companies are consolidating roles, demanding more output from fewer people. There is no room for inefficiency. This environment rewards people who are technically competent, emotionally steady, and willing to work without drama. It punishes those who rely on institutional protection rather than performance. Again, this is not personal, it is structural. For individuals caught on the wrong side of this shift, the path forward is unclear. Retraining is expensive, time consuming, and uncertain. Social safety nets are strained. Family structures are weaker than in previous generations. Community support is fragmented. That is why this moment feels so overwhelming for so many. It is not just economic pressure, it is the realization that there may be no one coming to help. Men who accepted that reality earlier adjusted earlier. Women who were told help would always be available are discovering that help has conditions, limits, and expiration dates. This is not cruelty, it is scarcity. Scarcity changes everything. It reveals priorities, it exposes illusions, it forces choice. And as we move forward, the conversation must shift from blame to strategy, from entitlement to preparation, from nostalgia to realism. The people who cling to old narratives will suffer the most. The people who adapt will survive. This does not mean abandoning cooperation or empathy. It means rebuilding them on honest terms. Mutual respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned. Mutual support cannot be one-sided. It must be reciprocal. For men who have found peace in withdrawal, the incentive to return must be real. Safety, stability, respect. These are not abstract concepts. They are practical requirements. For women navigating a harsher economic reality, the path forward requires humility and adaptation. Skills matter. Relationships matter. Long-term planning matters. The era of assuming systems will always absorb risk is ending. This is not the collapse of society. It is a correction. Corrections are painful because they remove excess and expose weakness, but they also create space for something more stable to emerge. The question is who will be willing to change? One of the most misunderstood aspects of this shift is the idea that it happened suddenly. In reality, it did not. What we are seeing now is the visible phase of a process that began years ago. Signals were present, but they were dismissed, reframed, or buried beneath optimistic narratives. Warnings were labeled as pessimism. Data was replaced with intention. And anyone who questioned the direction was accused of resisting progress. But systems do not respond to intention, they respond to pressure. For a long time, the pressure was masked by cheap money and expanding markets. Companies could absorb inefficiencies without immediate consequences. Governments could borrow to smooth over problems. Individuals could rely on credit to bridge gaps between income and lifestyle. That environment allowed contradictions to coexist without forcing resolution. That environment no longer exists. As interest rates rose and consumer demand weakened, the margin for error disappeared. Companies began auditing themselves in ways they had not done in years. Every department was asked the same questions. What do you produce? What does it cost? What happens if you are gone? Those questions have a way of cutting through rhetoric very quickly. This is why so many people describe the current moment as a betrayal. They believed the rules were permanent. They believed protections would hold. They believed they were insulated from downside. But the truth is that no one is insulated forever, especially not in systems built on competition. The hardest realization for many is that the system they trusted was never designed to protect individuals indefinitely. It was designed to optimize output. During periods of abundance, that optimization can feel generous. During periods of scarcity, it feels brutal. Scarcity strips away sentiment. As this realization spreads, we are seeing a psychological shift alongside the economic one. People are no longer asking how to advance, they are asking how to survive. That change in mindset alters behavior dramatically. Risk tolerance collapses. Long term planning shortens. Cooperation becomes conditional. This is where relationships, both personal and professional, come under strain. When resources are tight, people reevaluate who they can afford to support. Obligations that once felt manageable now feel suffocating. Roles that were once accepted without question are scrutinized. For many men, this reevaluation began earlier. After years of being told their contributions were undesirable or replaceable, many disengaged emotionally before they disengaged financially. They lowered expectations. They reduced investment. They stopped assuming responsibility for outcomes they could not control. That emotional disengagement acted as a form of preparation, even if it was not consciously framed that way. When economic pressure increased, these men were already operating with fewer dependencies. They had fewer people relying on them, fewer promises to keep, fewer risks to absorb. For many women, the process was reversed. Emotional investment in institutions and narratives remained high, while economic conditions deteriorated quietly in the background. When the break finally came, it felt sudden and overwhelming. This difference in timing explains much of the disconnect we see today. One group adapted early and gradually. The other is being forced to adapt late and rapidly. The emotional experience of those two paths is completely different. Rapid adaptation feels like crisis. Gradual adaptation feels like evolution. This is why conversations around this topic often fail. People are not arguing from the same starting point. They are not reacting to the same timeline. They are not processing the same loss. The loss itself is not just financial, it is existential. It is the loss of certainty, the loss of narrative, the loss of identity. When someone has been told for years that they are winning, that they are on the right side of history, discovering that history has changed direction creates cognitive shock. That shock often turns outward. People look for villains, for betrayal, for someone to blame. But blame does not rebuild stability, it only delays adaptation. Meanwhile, companies continue to move forward without apology. They are not interested in social debates. They are interested in survival. The longer economic pressure persists, the more aggressive their decisions become. This is not personal, it is mechanical. We are entering a phase where employment will increasingly resemble a transaction rather than a relationship. Loyalty will be minimal, expectations will be explicit, performance will be monitored continuously. Anyone who cannot keep pace will be replaced. In that environment, leverage matters, skills matter, reliability matters. Drama is a liability, uncertainty is a cost. This is why we are seeing a renewed emphasis on technical competence and measurable output. Not because companies have suddenly become hostile, but because they can no longer afford ambiguity. Ambiguity is expensive when margins are thin. At the same time, social media continues to amplify emotional reactions to these changes. Platforms reward outrage, fear, and vulnerability. They encourage public processing of private crises. This creates a feedback loop where distress becomes performative and performance replaces problem solving. Watching these videos, it is easy to feel empathy. It is also easy to feel fatigue because the same pattern repeats: shock, anger, bargaining, appeals, and then silence. What is rarely discussed is what comes after acceptance. Acceptance is quiet. It does not trend. It does not go viral. It looks like people downsizing, moving, retraining, changing expectations, letting go of old plans. It looks like fewer posts and more spreadsheets. Men who have already embraced acceptance appear calm, not because they are unaffected, but because they stopped expecting rescue. They are not waiting for systems to change, they are adapting their lives to the systems that exist. This is not resignation, it is realism. Realism is uncomfortable because it removes hope that is not grounded in action. But it also creates clarity, and clarity is the foundation of resilience. For women navigating this transition, the path forward requires confronting uncomfortable truths that were long avoided. That independence without redundancy is fragile, that careers are not identities. That security comes from diversification, not reliance on a single narrative. This does not mean abandoning ambition. It means anchoring ambition to reality rather than ideology. The same is true for relationships. Mutual reliance cannot be built on contempt. Cooperation cannot be sustained through coercion. Respect cannot be demanded while dismissing the experiences of others. For years, many men felt that their concerns were minimized or mocked. When they spoke about risk, cost, and imbalance, they were told they were fragile or regressive. Over time, they stopped speaking. Silence replaced dialogue. Now, that silence is being interpreted as abandonment. But from the perspective of those who left, it was self defense. This difference in interpretation is at the heart of the current impasse. One side sees withdrawal as cruelty, the other sees it as survival. Until that gap is acknowledged honestly, reconciliation is unlikely. Or reconciliation requires accountability on both sides. It requires admitting that some choices had consequences that were predictable but ignored. It requires acknowledging harm without weaponizing it. It requires rebuilding trust slowly, not demanding it immediately. Trust cannot be legislated, it cannot be shamed into existence. It emerges from consistent behavior over time. As economic conditions continue to tighten, more people will be forced into this reckoning. More careers will stall. More lifestyles will become unsustainable. More assumptions will collapse. The people who survive this period intact will be those who let go of resentment quickly and focus on reconstruction. Those who cling to grievance will burn energy they cannot afford to lose. This is where the idea of walking away becomes powerful. Walking away is not running, it is choosing where to invest limited resources. It is recognizing when a system no longer offers a fair exchange. It is opting out of unwinnable games. Men who have walked away are not waiting for validation. They are building lives that require less from others. That is why they appear unaffected by narratives of crisis. Their expectations are lower, their dependencies are fewer. That does not mean their lives are empty, it means they are intentional. Intentional living is not glamorous. It does not promise constant excitement or validation, but it is stable, and stability is becoming rare. As we move deeper into this decade, stability will become the most valuable currency. People will trade status for peace, visibility for safety, expansion for sustainability. Those who recognize this early will adjust smoothly. Those who resist will struggle longer. The girl boss era, as it was marketed, depended on conditions that no longer exist. It depended on infinite growth, institutional protection, and cultural momentum. Without those supports, it collapses under its own weight. What replaces it has not yet fully formed, but it will be shaped by scarcity, realism, and accountability. It will reward those who contribute reliably and punish those who rely on narratives alone. This is not a moral judgment, it is an observation. Every era produces myths. Those myths persist until reality interrupts them. We are living through that interruption now. What often gets lost in discussions like this is that systems do not fail all at once, they hollow out first. On the surface, everything appears functional. Offices remain open, meetings continue, marketing campaigns roll out. But underneath, the internal logic changes. Decision making becomes defensive rather than expansive. Innovation slows, risk tolerance collapses. When organizations enter this phase, they stop asking how to grow and start asking how to endure. That single shift changes every downstream decision. Hiring becomes conservative, promotions become rare. Roles that once existed to manage culture, perception, or internal politics are quietly deprioritized. This is why so many people feel blindsided. They were still showing up to work, still hitting surface level benchmarks, still participating in the rituals of corporate life. What they did not see was that the criteria for survival had changed while no one was looking. During expansion, personality can outweigh productivity. During contraction, it never does. And this reality is uncomfortable because it exposes how much of modern professional life was built on conditions rather than capability. When conditions shift, Capability is all that remains. Titles lose meaning, credentials lose power. Output becomes the only language that matters. For years, many workers were told that the system would evolve to accommodate them, that structures would bend, that standards would be redefined. And for a time, that appeared true. But standards cannot be lowered indefinitely without consequences. At some point, the gap between expectation and reality becomes too large to ignore. We are now at that point, and as companies shed excess, they are rediscovering a harsh truth. Performance inequality exists. Not everyone contributes equally. Not every role generates value proportional to its cost. These realities were obscured by ideology, but they were never erased. When that realization hits, decisions become swift and unsentimental. This is why layoffs feel different this time. They are not framed as temporary setbacks, they are framed as necessary corrections. People are not being told to wait it out, they are being told to move on. And moving on is far more difficult in an environment where opportunity is scarce. The emotional impact of this cannot be overstated. Work is not just income, it is structure, routine, identity, social connection. When it disappears, people are left not only with financial stress, but with existential uncertainty. For individuals who were told that certain outcomes were guaranteed, this uncertainty feels like betrayal. But guarantees were never real. They were implied by stability, not written into the system. Stability itself was conditional. This is where the broader social implications become impossible to ignore. For decades, economic expansion allowed unresolved tensions between men and women to coexist. Roles blurred, expectations conflicted, responsibility shifted unevenly. But growth masked these issues. Now that growth has slowed, the unresolved tensions are surfacing. Men who disengaged earlier did so because they perceived an imbalance between cost and reward. They saw increasing expectations paired with decreasing appreciation. They saw risk without reciprocity. Over time, disengagement felt rational. Women who were encouraged to prioritize independence often interpreted male withdrawal as hostility rather than fatigue. The assumption was that men would eventually return once corrected, shamed, or re educated. That assumption underestimated how deeply trust had eroded. Trust, once broken, does not regenerate automatically. It requires proof, and proof takes time. In the absence of trust, people default to self interest. That is not cynicism, it is a survival. As more women experience economic instability, there is a growing realization that independence without support structures is fragile. This does not mean dependence is desirable. It means interdependence matters. But interdependence cannot be rebuilt on old terms. It cannot be rebuilt by pretending the last decade did not happen. It requires acknowledging how incentives were distorted and how behavior responded accordingly. Many men now view re engagement as a high risk proposition, not because they are unwilling to care, but because the consequences of caring have become unpredictable. Legal exposure, financial obligation, social scrutiny. These risks do not disappear simply because circumstances have changed. From their perspective, withdrawal was the only way to regain control. This creates a stalemate. One side wants reintegration, the other demands safety first. Neither side feels heard, and economic pressure intensifies the conflict. Historically, periods like this produce one of two outcomes. Either expectations realign and cooperation resumes on new terms, or fragmentation accelerates and individuals retreat further into self sufficiency. We are currently closer to the second outcome than the first. Self sufficiency, however, is not the same as isolation. Many men who have stepped away are not lonely. They have friendships, hobbies, purpose. What they lack are obligations that drain them without offering security. This distinction is crucial. Being alone is not the same as feeling abandoned. Many men feel relieved. That relief becomes addictive when compared to the stress of constant evaluation and accusation. For women, the emotional landscape is different. Social networks often revolve around shared experiences and mutual affirmation. When those networks become saturated with crisis, they can amplify distress rather than resolve it. This is why so many online discussions feel circular. People validate each other's pain without offering pathways forward. Empathy becomes a substitute for strategy. Strategy is harder. Strategy requires uncomfortable changes. It requires letting go of certain assumptions about fairness and entitlement. It requires rebuilding competence in areas that were neglected. Competence is the quiet foundation of resilience. It does not trend, it does not announce itself, but it endures. As the labor market continues to tighten, competence will matter more than alignment. People who can reliably produce value will find opportunities even if they are fewer and harder to access. People who rely on narratives will struggle. This shift will feel unfair to those who played by the old rules. But fairness is not a property of markets. Markets reward what they need, not what people expect. This is why the language of grievance is ineffective in economic crises. Complaints do not alter demand. They do not create jobs. They do not lower costs. Adaptation does. Adaptation may involve retraining. It may involve relocation. It may involve downsizing. It may involve rethinking lifestyle expectations entirely. None of these are easy, but they are possible. The danger lies in denial. Denial delays action, and delay compounds loss. Men who accepted earlier that systems would not protect them adjusted earlier. Women who were told systems would always protect them are adjusting later. Timing matters. This does not make one group superior, it makes their experiences asymmetric. Understanding that asymmetry is the first step toward meaningful dialogue. Without it, conversations devolve into blame and resentment. Blame is tempting because it preserves identity. It allows people to say they failed because the system betrayed them, not because they misjudged risk. But misjudging risk is human. Everyone does it at some point. What matters is what happens next. The next phase of this era will be defined by realism, by people who accept that the world has changed and refuse to waste energy arguing with that fact. They will build smaller but stronger lives. They will prioritize stability over status. They will choose peace over performance. This does not mean ambition disappears. It means ambition becomes grounded. Grounded ambition is sustainable. It does not rely on external validation. It does not require constant applause. It grows slowly and quietly. The louder narratives of empowerment and collapse will fade as reality asserts itself. People will stop arguing online and start adjusting offline. That shift will not make headlines, but it will reshape society more profoundly than any trend. We are not witnessing the end of progress. We are witnessing the end of a particular story about progress. What replaces it will be less glamorous, less forgiving, but more honest. And honesty, while painful, is the foundation of anything that lasts. There's another layer to this moment that rarely gets discussed, and that is how deeply expectations shape behavior long before reality forces a correction. For years, many people made life decisions based not on present conditions, but on promised futures. They chose careers, delayed relationships, postponed family formation, and structured their finances around the belief that stability would increase over time. That belief was not irrational, given the environment they grew up in, but it was conditional. When conditions change, decisions made under old assumptions can become liabilities overnight. This is why so many people feel as though the ground has vanished beneath them. They did everything they were told to do. They followed the script. They invested in credentials, in careers, in institutions, and yet the outcome they expected is no longer available. That disconnect creates anger, but it also creates paralysis. Paralysis is one of the most dangerous responses to rapid change. When people freeze, they stop gathering information, they stop adapting. They wait for clarity that never arrives. In a fast moving environment, waiting is costly. Men who disengaged earlier did so because they sensed this instability before it became obvious. They did not necessarily predict the specifics, but they recognized a pattern: rising expectations, shrinking rewards, increasing risk. Over time, opting out felt safer than continuing to participate. Opting out, however, is not passive. It requires deliberate restructuring of life, lower expenses, fewer dependencies, clearer boundaries. These changes are not dramatic, but they compound. For women who remained invested in institutional pathways, the shock is sharper because the investment was deeper. Careers were not just income streams, they were proof of identity, proof of independence, proof that the narrative was working. When that proof disappears, it is not just financial loss, it is existential loss. This is why conversations around this topic often become emotionally charged so quickly. People are not defending policies or ideologies, they are defending their sense of self. Any challenge feels personal because the stakes are personal. But economic reality does not negotiate with identity. It forces recalibration, whether people are ready or not. As this recalibration accelerates, we are seeing a shift in how people talk about security. For a long time, security was framed as something external: a stable job, a strong institution, a reliable system. Now, more people are realizing that external security is fragile. Internal security, on the other hand, scales. Internal security comes from competence, adaptability, and restraint. It comes from knowing how to live within means. It comes from being able to pivot when conditions change. It comes from not tying self worth exclusively to one role or outcome. And men who have walked away often exhibit this kind of internal security, not because they are immune to hardship, but because they stopped outsourcing stability to systems they did not control. That choice reduced volatility in their lives. For women facing sudden instability, building internal security feels overwhelming because it was never emphasized as necessary. Independence was framed as empowerment, but empowerment without redundancy is brittle. Redundancy is what allows systems to absorb shocks. And in engineering, redundancy is not waste, it is resilience. Human lives work the same way: multiple skills, multiple income streams, multiple sources of meaning. These buffers reduce the impact of failure in any single area. For years, many people were encouraged to specialize narrowly and trust that systems would compensate for risk. That strategy works in stable environments. It fails in volatile ones. We are now in volatility. Volatility exposes fragility quickly. It also rewards those who prepared quietly. This is why the cultural tone is shifting. Grand declarations are being replaced by practical questions. How much do I need to live? What can I cut? What skills can I learn quickly? Where can I move? Who can I rely on? These are not glamorous questions, but they are the right ones. Men who simplified their lives earlier are answering these questions from a position of relative calm. Their margins are wider, their obligations are fewer, their expectations are lower. That gives them time to think instead of panic. Women who are encountering these questions for the first time under pressure are understandably overwhelmed. Panic compresses time. It narrows options. It makes everything feel urgent. Urgency, however, often leads to poor decisions. This is where storytelling becomes dangerous. When people frame their situation as a sudden injustice rather than a delayed consequence, they focus on protest rather than preparation. Protest feels productive because it releases emotion. Preparation feels lonely and slow, but only one of those paths leads to stability. This does not mean that past policies should not be examined critically. They should, but examination without adaptation is stagnation. The people who wait for accountability before taking action will wait too long. Economic cycles do not pause for debates. As this period continues, We will see increasing divergence in outcomes. People who adapt will stabilize. People who cling to old narratives will accumulate losses. This divergence will create resentment, but it will also create lessons. And one of the most important lessons will be about incentives. People respond to incentives, not slogans. When incentives reward withdrawal, people withdraw. When incentives reward competence, people compete. When incentives punish engagement, engagement disappears. For years, many men felt that engagement carried disproportionate risk. That perception did not come from nowhere. It came from lived experience. Over time, withdrawal became rational. Now, as economic pressure mounts, there is a desire to reverse that withdrawal without addressing the incentives that caused it. That approach is unlikely to succeed. Re-engagement requires structural change, not emotional appeals. Structural change means clarity, clear expectations, clear boundaries, clear accountability, clear reciprocity. Without those, trust will not return. For women navigating the shift, the challenge is to rebuild leverage without relying on narratives that no longer carry weight. Leverage comes from value creation, from skills that are scarce, from reliability under pressure. This may require letting go of certain ideals about work and fulfillment. It may require choosing stability over passion. These are difficult trade offs, but they are not failures. They are adaptations. Adaptation is not surrender, it is intelligence applied to reality. The same is true for men who have withdrawn. Withdrawal is not the end state, it is a pause, a reassessment, a recalibration. Some may choose to re engage under new terms, others may not. Both choices are valid if they are made consciously. What is not sustainable is pretending that the past decade did not alter trust permanently. It did. Trust can be rebuilt, but only with honesty about what went wrong. One of the reasons conversations stall is that acknowledging mistakes feels like conceding moral ground. People fear that admitting error will invalidate their entire identity. But identity is not static, it evolves. The strongest identities are flexible, they absorb feedback, they adjust. As we move forward, flexibility will matter more than ideology. People who can revise their beliefs without collapsing will fare better than those who cling rigidly to outdated assumptions. This applies to institutions as well. Companies that adapt quickly will survive. Those that cling to optics over output will fail. Governments that acknowledge limits will stabilize. Those that promise more than they can deliver will lose credibility. Credibility is a form of capital. Once spent, it is hard to regain. We are watching a credibility reset across multiple domains: work, relationships, institutions. The reset is painful because it removes illusions that people relied on for comfort. But illusions are expensive when they break. Reality, while harsh, is predictable. And predictability allows planning. Planning is the antidote to panic. For individuals facing uncertainty, the path forward begins with assessment. Honest assessment. What skills do I have? What do I need? What can I cut? What am I willing to change? These questions are uncomfortable because they force trade offs, but avoiding them does not make them disappear. Men who asked these questions earlier did so because they felt forced to. Women who are being forced to ask them now are not weak, they are late. And lateness is not fatal if action follows quickly. The danger lies in waiting for permission to adapt. No one is coming to grant it. The next few years will reward pragmatism. People who can detach emotion from decision making will move faster. Those who cannot will struggle longer. This does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means prioritizing effectiveness over expression, doing what works instead of what feels validating. Validation is cheap, stability is rare. As society recalibrates, there will be fewer shared narratives and more individualized paths. People will build lives that make sense for their circumstances rather than conforming to a universal script. This fragmentation may feel isolating, but it also creates freedom. Freedom to opt out of failing systems, freedom to redefine success, freedom to live smaller but more secure lives. For many men, this freedom has already been claimed. For many women, it is just beginning to appear, though it may not look like the freedom they were promised. Freedom often arrives disguised as constraint. Constraint forces focus. Focus enables mastery. Mastery creates leverage. Leverage is what allows people to negotiate with reality rather than be crushed by it. The coming era will belong to those who build leverage quietly, who stop seeking approval and start seeking competence, who accept that the world does not owe them outcomes, but does respond to effort aligned with demand. This is not a pessimistic conclusion. It is a realistic one. Reality does not care about narratives, but it does reward those who understand it. As this chapter closes, what becomes undeniable is that the world people were promised is not the world they are inheriting. That realization is painful, but it is also clarifying. Clarity strips away distractions and forces focus on what actually matters. When illusions fall, priorities reorder themselves naturally. The most important shift happening right now is not economic, even though economics is the trigger. It is psychological. People are beginning to understand that no institution is coming to rescue them. That understanding is terrifying at first, but it is also liberating. Once you stop waiting to be saved, you start asking better questions. Better questions lead to better decisions. For men who have already stepped away, this period feels less chaotic because the waiting ended years ago. They are not shocked by instability because they planned for it emotionally, if not always consciously. Their lives are already configured around the assumption that nothing is guaranteed and that peace must be built deliberately. This is why they appear calm in a moment of widespread anxiety. Calm is not indifference, it is acceptance. Acceptance allows action without panic. Panic narrows vision, acceptance expands it. For women who are only now confronting the fragility of systems they trusted, the emotional burden is heavier. But heaviness does not mean hopelessness. It means the work ahead is real. And real work, while exhausting, produces tangible results. The mistake many people make in moments like this is trying to restore the past instead of building for the present. The past is gone. The conditions that supported it are gone. No amount of outrage or nostalgia will bring them back. What can be built instead is something leaner, more resilient, and more honest. That honesty begins with acknowledging trade offs. You cannot have total independence without total responsibility. You cannot outsource risk and still claim control. You cannot dismantle mutual obligation and expect unconditional support when circumstances change. These truths are uncomfortable because they cut through comforting narratives, but they are also empowering because they restore agency. Agency is the ability to act meaningfully within constraints. It does not promise ease, it promises effectiveness. The people who will thrive in the coming years are not those who shout the loudest, but those who adapt the fastest. They will be less visible, less validated, less celebrated, but they will be stable. Stability will become the new status. We will see fewer displays of excess and more quiet recalibration. People will choose smaller homes, fewer possessions, simpler routines, not because they are forced to, but because they realize how much stress complexity creates. Men who embrace simplicity early will continue refining it. Women who are learning its value now will discover that it offers something narratives never did: peace. Peace is not passive, it is maintained through discipline, through boundaries, through honest self assessment. Self assessment is difficult because it requires admitting where expectations exceeded preparation. But that admission is the beginning of growth. Growth in this era will look different. It will not be linear. It will not be glamorous. It will be personal. People will grow by cutting away what no longer serves them and strengthening what remains. This applies to careers, relationships, lifestyles, and beliefs. Beliefs that cannot survive contact with reality must be revised. Not because reality is cruel, but because it is consistent. Consistency allows learning. Learning allows improvement. Improvement is possible even in contraction. It just looks different than expansion. Instead of climbing, people will consolidate. Instead of accumulating, they will optimize. Instead of chasing approval, they will seek alignment between effort and outcome. And alignment reduces friction. Friction drains energy. Energy is finite. Men who have withdrawn often describe feeling lighter, not because life is easy, but because unnecessary friction was removed. They stopped fighting systems that punished them for participation. They stopped negotiating their worth. They simplified. Women who are beginning this process may initially feel loss more than relief. That is normal. Letting go hurts before it heals. But over time, the same simplification brings clarity. Clarity replaces confusion. Confusion feeds anxiety. Anxiety paralyzes. This is why the next few years will be decisive. People will either adapt intentionally or be dragged reluctantly. The difference in outcomes will be stark. Those who adapt will not necessarily be happier in the conventional sense, but they will be grounded. Grounded people weather storms better than idealists clinging to broken maps. This does not mean abandoning compassion or cooperation. It means rebuilding them on realistic terms. Cooperation works when both sides perceive fairness. Compassion works when it does not demand self destruction. The old social contracts failed because they became one sided. Any new contracts must be reciprocal to survive. Reciprocity is not transactional coldness, it is mutual respect made practical. Respect grows when expectations are clear and boundaries are honored. It collapses when obligations are enforced without consent. For men, consent to re engage will require safety, predictability, and respect. For women, rebuilding stability will require competence, humility, and resilience. These requirements are not insults, they are conditions. Conditions are how reality communicates. Ignoring conditions does not change them. Responding to them does. As the dust settles, fewer people will talk about eras ending and more will focus on lives rebuilding. The noise will fade, the work will remain. The people who succeed will not announce it. They will simply disappear from the chaos and reappear later with quieter, steadier lives. That quiet will be misinterpreted as apathy. It is not. It is peace. Peace does not need validation. If there is one lesson to carry forward, it is this. Do not build your life on promises made during abundance. Build it on principles that hold during scarcity. Competence, discipline, adaptability, mutual respect. These principles are not ideological, they are practical. They work regardless of who is in charge or what narrative dominates. The world ahead will reward those who understand this. To those watching who feel lost, understand that confusion is a signal, not a sentence. It means your assumptions are being updated. That process is painful, but it is necessary. You are not failing because the world changed. You only fail if you refuse to change with it. To those who already adapted, understand that calm is not cruelty, it is the result of preparation. And preparation is something anyone can choose even now. History does not remember comfort, it remembers adaptation. This period will be studied later as a turning point, not because of what people said online, but because of what they changed in their lives. If you take anything from this video, let it be this: reality always wins. The only question is whether you fight it or work with it. And now I want to hear from you. What did you think about what was discussed in this video? Do you agree with this analysis? Do you see these patterns playing out in your own life, your workplace, or your relationships? Leave a comment and share your thoughts because these conversations matter. Like the video, if you like it, don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.